So my name is Taylor. Thank you so much for your patience with me. This is my personal contact information. So if you have just a specific question or if you need to get a hold of me, please feel free to do so. All phones and microphones have been muted except for mine, thankfully now. But please feel free to just type in questions in there in that question pane that you guys have been using. My friend Rod Kyle's here. He'll be answering things in the question pane if I don't get to them while I'm doing the webinar. This is also his contact information as well. And anything that he doesn't get to, just no worries. I will be more than happy to stay here after the webinar to answer any questions you guys might have, to demonstrate anything you guys might need. And if it's more of a specific thing for your specific site, then worst comes to worst, I just give you a phone call or shoot you an email after the fact. So any questions you may have, feel free, just whip them out there and we'll get to them as soon as possible. So just as a slight overview, the class agenda for today, we're just going to go over our basic accounting principles and just how to get started with the software. So this is just right from scratch. We're just going to go over logging in, kind of navigating the site. We're going to show just kind of how to import from your Shepherd Staff software if you are importing from Shepherd Staff. Just the general setup of the site, as well as the administrative settings, just your books, your payees or vendors. And then we'll actually start looking into the chart of accounts. I'll be starting with a chart of accounts that has been made, but I'll be showing you exactly how those different accounts behave, as well as how to add them to your chart of accounts. And then also going over each individual account type, including restricted funds and how they differ from dedicated funds if you had been using Shepherd Staff previously, as well as how to enter in budgets and changing and locking your fiscal year. Then we'll just have a small little quiz. It's not graded by any means, just to make sure that I'm really nailing home specific concepts. And then we'll just have a Q&A session. I am timing this to be about an hour, plus the time that we had spent just fixing the microphone, but it should be about an hour. If it goes a little over, then we'll just work from there. Let's see. We'll just go ahead and get started. So when you first purchase Ledger, you will receive receive both a subdomain where you can access it, as well as an invitation to actually create your first username and password. So up here, sorry about the bookmarks, but if you look up here, you can see Christ.com Church right here. So that is the subdomain, and it's going to share it with your member site and your Church360 Unite site if you have that as part of your software package as well. So it's all going to have the same subdomain so that they can all interface together. All right. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my webcam so it's a little bit bigger for you. So once you know how to access your site with your subdomain and you have received that invitation, you will be shown your church details when you first try to access your Ledger page. And then you just make sure that your church name, the church number, and church address is correct. You can always change these later, so it's just a matter of just confirming the details just so that we have the setup correct for right now. And once you click submit, I said when you click submit, once it makes me sign in again, because it does time out after about 2 hours. Or if it doesn't like me, then I'll just cheat. Okay, much better. So once that works out, then you'll be greeted with creating your first book. So on the left-hand side, you can just start from scratch. You can choose your book name as well as the starting fiscal year month. It will always be at the first of the month, naturally. And then you can just enter a start date for the book itself. It doesn't have to be at the start of a fiscal year, but fiscal years are going to be in a yearly format, so it is recommended that you do that. You can always change this later if you have previous balances that you need to add in, though. If you're starting from Shepherd Staff, from using them, the finance module in Shepherd Staff, you can select a database and import it that way. If you have something called dedicated accounts in Shepherd Staff, then you'll only be able to import your chart of accounts with current balances only. If you don't have those, if you move those over kind of into expense or income accounts, or even just move it straight back into the main asset account, then you could also import your balances and transactions. However, if you want to keep your dedicated accounts, no worries. You can just select this and you'll be able to link it up with its respective asset account. Depending on how big your site is, it can take anywhere between maybe an hour or 2 hours, but eventually you'll be able to log in and you'll be able to see that information once that is finished. So I did keep the bookmark here, or the bookmark bar right here in Chrome, just so I could show you that if you needed to create a favorites or a favorite or a bookmark for your ledger site, usually if you right-click your respective toolbar, depending on the browser that you have, it might be slightly different, then you should be able to add a page. And then whenever it is that you need to access your ledger page again, then you can just click on it and it will take you straight here just so that you can go straight into logging in. If you wanted to also add it just to your desktop, you could also do that. I would recommend minimizing your browser window. Just kind of click your URL just so it's all highlighted. And then you can just drag it over and create your own little icon, just in case that's helpful to any of you guys. So once you have selected that, I'll just go ahead and create a new book name. We can say, helps if I take my caps lock off. I could just start with the general fund, start in January, and we can just start this year. And then you'll be greeted with your ledger site, so to speak. So I did mention just in passing that after 2 hours of inactivity, you can, it will automatically log you out. And in the event that happens, then you can always just log back in. You can have your password saved in your browser if you need to, or if you've forgotten your password, your forgot your password utility is right underneath your login screen. So I'm just going to navigate over just to another site that's already kind of been set up. It kind of has different transactions that have already been entered for this year, just so that you can see how it's going to be looking when you are just kind of right there in the nitty-gritty and already using it. So just kind of as a tour, we're going to start in the top left-hand corner up here. And right here where this little dollar sign is, this is your home button. So wherever you are on your site, if you click on here, it will always take you to this home page, and it will show your assets, liabilities, income, blah, 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 as well as all of your transactions for whatever year it is that you've chosen for your current fiscal year. Right next to it where you see Christ Community Church, you can see with this little arrow that it is a drop-down window. So you can have multiple books here. In the ledger software, book means just a completely separate set of accounts. So they are just completely separate. So anytime you need to switch between books, you can go up here to the drop-down menu and just select whichever book it is that you need to change to. Then a little further over to the right, we have here this little printer button. It is the print queue for your checks. So the ledger software does allow you to print checks directly from this software. And if you go over to the queue, it will show you all of the checks that have not been marked as being printed. Even you don't have to use this software for checks. If it's like a handwritten check, then no worries. You can always mark it as printed. And further transactions as well as more printing details, that should be covered tomorrow in our L2 session. So I'll be going over that as well, and then we'll be going over more on how to print checks. Next to the print queue is your pending transactions. I had mentioned previously before that if you share the subdomain with a member site, then you can see that there are some deposits here directly from members. Members is our church management software, so if you put in offerings in members, then they will come directly over here to deposits. And I'll be going more into that as well tomorrow. Next to the pending transactions, this little book here, this is where all of your reports are going to be. And this is going to be gone over in our reports module in L3. So that should be Thursday. So including the general ledger, income and expense, chart of accounts, the report, and your balance sheet and event log. Next to that is this little gear icon, and these are your settings. So if you look here, it is kind of split between the top and the bottom. This top area where the chart of accounts, budgets, fiscal years, and transactions, this is specific to only this book. So if you needed to change anything in the above for a different book, you will need to navigate over to that book to edit these specific settings. For the bottom settings here in general, user roles, books, payees, all of these are shared between the books. This is the site itself. So everything here is going to be applied to all of the books under this subdomain. And last but not least, we have the profile icon. Here we have Mr. Rod Kyles here, his little avatar here, and here you also have your user settings and the ability to log out early just so that your financial information is safe if you need to get up and leave your desk. So after that little toolbar, there's this little white field here. This is what we call the Omnibar. And it's kind of the Omnibar because it can help you navigate near anywhere in your chart of accounts. So if you click inside of it, you'll be greeted with this drop-down menu. You can go straight to a fund as you need. So if I wanted the retirement fund, if I can spell, it will take you straight there. It will take you to your retirement account. It will even look into specific sections in your breadcrumbs right up here. It's a little hard to see, so I apologize for that. But everywhere where you see retirement, it's going to include in that search area. So speaking of breadcrumbs, if I chose, say, the retirement accounts here, once I navigate over to this specific account, you can see its transaction history as well as anything within it. So you can see the breadcrumbs on how exactly I got here. So if we went straight from the home page to the asset area, and then from asset settings, or from the asset list, we chose the Farmers Bank and chose retirement accounts, then we would be able to navigate here instead of using the Omnibar. And anything that's within this specific account, if it's a category or if it is an account with others in it, then you'll be able to see them in boxes here, like this 401k right here. To the far right, you can see that most, if not all, views can be exported to, exported to Excel or printed directly from the browser window. And you also have the option to use this drop-down menu to select exactly what year you want to show. It's not restricted, at least the report view is not restricted by your fiscal year, so you can choose whatever year it is that you need. You can even drill down into a specific quarter, a specific month, or you can even put in your own custom date range on exactly what information, what transactions you want to see for this specific account. So that's just kind of the small little tour. We'll be going into it more when we're actually entering in transactions and running reports, but that's just kind of the gist of it. So speaking of just kind of general areas, we can go up here back to the settings icon and choose general just to get a feel for the general settings. Here you can verify that your church name and all of this information is correct. If you needed to change the address, phone, etc., then you can always do that from the general settings page. Also, if you ever need to contact support or sales or check up on a bill, you can always look at your customer number, and that will always be helpful in tracking down your specific account, just if you had that information available to you. Right underneath that customer number, you can see check style. We have 2 check styles in Church360 Ledger at this time. We have the top, where it's the check followed by 2 stubs, and then we have the middle where we have a stub followed by the check and then a stub on the bottom of the paper as well. If you were coming from Shepherd staff and you had physical middle checks from Shepherd staff, then they will work here in the Church360 Ledger software. These checks, they print directly from the browser onto that purchased check stock. So hopefully it will save you just a little bit of time, but those are the only options at this time. We are always open to feedback, but I can't guarantee if or when more options or check styles are going to be there. Also important to mention, we do support a specific type of check from printrevolution.co, so that's .co, not .com. You're not required to purchase from them, but that is the format that we use if you're ever in doubt. So after the general settings, we have the users and what they can see. So first, instead of users, I'm going to go down here to roles real quick. And roles essentially is the group of, is just a group that have the same permissions. So multiple people can have multiple roles. It just basically determines exactly what they can see and what they can change. So naturally, as an administrator, you have access to all the books. You can manage everything You can create any sort of transaction, and you can see all accounts. For another role, if you don't want someone to have just kind of free reign over your site, then you can always add in a new role. So say maybe I just want just a specific minister. If he wanted to just kind of check up on the finances but not actually change anything, then I could create this new role for him. And I can even choose what book he can see. So if he's only interested in maybe, say, the food pantry, maybe he's in charge of the food pantry, he'll only be able to see this specific book. So the preschool, any of the other church-related finances, he will not have any access to whatsoever. So if we did give him a specific book, maybe we did want him to kind of manage the chart of accounts, or maybe we just wanted him to be able to view them. And it's also up to you on whether or not he can create any transactions in here. If you wanted him to just view it, then great. If you wanted him to be able to just kind of create and print checks just as he needs, then you can just give him just those specific permissions, and he won't be able to make any other adjustments or changes to your site. You always want to make sure to submit it, and now you do have that, that specific minister role. So once you have the permissions set up, then you can go back up here to the settings area, and you can actually invite a member. So here we have multiple administrators. It is recommended to have multiple administrators just in case, one, leaves the church for whatever reason, becomes just unavailable to be reached, or just forgot their password or something, or just needed to be reinvited. Naturally, you don't want everybody to have administrator access, but it is recommended to have at least 2 administrators. So once I created that new minister permission, now I can actually invite that minister. So say if I wanted to add minister at church.com, I can go ahead, just put his email in there directly, and then I can assign him his specific minister role. And once I click submit, it's going to send an invitation to that email, and it will let you know right here. So he'll be able to get that invitation. He'll be able to create his password, and he'll be able to access whatever it is that you had written in for his access. So let's see. In the event that maybe he kind of loses his invitation, or it just needs to be resent, you do also have that option that you can just go back here to users, and if he needs that invitation again, you can just click resend that invitation, and then whatever his email address is, that will be where that invitation is just resent. So if he marked it as spam, then there's a chance it might still be in the spam folder. But if you continue to run into any issues with this, I do recommend contacting support. We'll be happy to take a look at it and see exactly where that email ended up and see if we can help you with that. So once everything looks good, we can just click submit, and he is updated. So if this minister left the church, or maybe you wanted to send it to a different email address, you could send out an invitation to a different email address, and whenever it is that you wanted to delete him, you can go over here to this minus sign right here, click here. Of course, it decides it doesn't want to do it for me. If you click delete, then it should remove it. But of course, the presentation gods just hate me today, and so it just wants me to look just more silly. But that is how it is supposed to work. It just doesn't like me at the moment. So I did go over how you can select different books, obviously not just from here. But if you also want to create a new book, then you can go up here to the settings icon and go down here to books. So I do have quite a bit right here at the moment, but if I ever wanted to just add something else, maybe there is, in addition to a preschool, maybe there's a new elementary school that we wanted to add, and we can certainly do that. And with different books, since they are completely separate, you can actually have different starting months. So for maybe in elementary school, maybe it has a non-calendar fiscal year, and you can choose to start it in June or July instead of the usual January. And you can always change the beginning of the book activity. Say if you wanted to enter in accounts before the June starting month, then that's fine as well. It just tells you exactly what the starting date's going to be for reporting. Oh, and I almost forgot. Since they are completely separate, any sort of money that you transfer between books, it's going to be put in either as a loan, if it's going to be paid back, or it's going to be as a gift or a payment. So it's just like paying any other business or any other separate entity. You're going to treat it as such. And if they pay it back, then it will be put in that way. And otherwise, it's just going to be just another gift. And then last but not least, we have payees, and these are your vendors, these are your employees, and all of these payees are shared between the books. So these are going to be all the vendors for all of the books. You can always search for a specific person. Maybe if I wanted Arlene right here, I could just use the search bar and find her right away. The name when adding is the only required field, so that's probably the best way to search for them. If you click here, you can see where it says history if you hover over it, and it will show you her specific information. So if you needed things like, what is it called? The 1099 forms, if you needed to know exactly how much you had paid a specific vendor for the year, then you could just go to Payees, find that specific vendor, and you can export or print whatever year it is that you need to get that information from. So I just wanted to go over that before I forgot. But to actually add in a payee, you just have to scroll all the way down to where this add button is. And the first and last name, they are the only ones that are required. So if it is just a company, it can just be the first name, no worries. But say I wanted to add in Ameren. I could put that in as the name, or I could put it in as the company, and add any sort of notes, any sort of addresses that I have. I can do that. And you will notice that whatever information that you add into it, like address information, that's going to be included in the history as well. Okay. So you're not required to create a payee before actually writing a transaction. You can create it on the fly when you create a transaction, and I'll go over that tomorrow when creating a transaction. But it is generally the best practice to enter all of your vendors, all of your payees, prior to doing any sort of transaction, just to make sure that you have all of their information correct, and that you're not creating a whole new payee duplicate, say for like Jim Bowling. We don't want him to have two different forms if we were putting in for a 1099. We don't want things to be duplicated. So it is recommended to just kind of take a look at your payee lists before you actually add in someone. So we have the general settings, we have our users, our books, and our vendors set up. Now we can actually start on our accounts. And I just wanted to go over our account types. So in Church360, our main source of money are going to be our assets. Basically, whatever our congregation owns. It includes your monetary current assets and your non-monetary fixed assets. Examples for your current and your current and fixed. Your monetary would include any of your checking and savings account, any sort of bank account, your CDs, and your stocks. So if you can put a monetary value on it, then it is considered an asset. In addition to that, assets can also include buildings, land, and any other equipment that you might have. So any sort of vehicles, your pews, your organ, all of that is your asset as well. And that is going to start with, since it is a bank account, it's going to start with its initial balance, which I'll show you in just a second. In addition to assets, we have this new fund called restricted funds. So if you are coming from Shepherd staff, it is different from dedicated accounts or dedicated funds. But the description is very similar. Basically, restricted funds, they are money reserved for a specific purpose. They are not budgeted, and they will carry over to the next year. So restricted funds, they are going to act as a piece or a piece of the pie in your assets. So, when you think of the pie of all of your assets, there's going to be restricted for a specific purpose, and then there's going to be unrestricted. Next up, we have liabilities, and these are amounts that we owe. And this can include short-term debt and long-term debt. So in the short term, that can include things like payroll taxes, CSA or HSAs, and any sort of offerings from other congregations as well. Long-term debt can be anything from mortgages, any sort of bank loan, and also car loans if you guys have a vehicle. So if you come from Shepherd staff, the dedicated accounts, they act more like a liability, and restricted accounts act more like an asset. So instead of having IOUs for all of these different areas, they are actually a physical piece of the pie in your the sum of your assets. So you might be thinking, okay, well, I want to keep them as liabilities. So if you wanted to start from scratch and just have any sort of dedicated or restricted money be in a liability, you can do that. The software does allow for that, but there are just a few things you need to keep in mind. There are pros and there are cons. If you wanted to use a liability for dedicated funds, then you wouldn't be able to make deposits to it. So software does not allow deposits to a liability account. So if you needed to add a deposit to it, then you would need to add it to the asset and then move it over using a journal entry. It also means that you wouldn't be able to use the pending transactions from Church360 members. So any sort of offerings that they make in Church360 members, when they're transferred over, you wouldn't be able to actually use those pending transactions. You'd have to just kind of disregard them and put the fund totals or the fund deposits in manually. But on the other side, there are pros to using liabilities, so it is completely up to you. You can see that restricted money then, it will be on the balance sheet. As restricted money and dedicated funds, they usually have their own report. If you wanted it to actually physically be on the balance sheet, then you could just enter it in as a liability instead. And if you wanted to forego using income and expense accounts to show the flow of money in and out, then you could use it as a liability instead. It's just completely up to you. Instead of using the income and expense accounts as offsets, then you could just use just paying off that liability account. So I did mention we do have the income accounts, and those are it's the first of the two tracking accounts where you record the revenue received within that current fiscal year. They can be budgeted if you need to, and certain examples include things like offerings, interest earned on your bank account. If you have any rental property, then that would be a source of income. And so you could always have that as a budget, as an expected revenue. And it would continue throughout the year until the end of the year when you close out that fiscal year. It will go ahead and zero out and just start again with that new fiscal year. And on the other side, we have the expenses, where you record how they're spent. These two can be budgeted, and different examples can include things like salaries, materials for church programs, office supplies, postage, and any sort of utility bills. And just like income, it also zeroes out at the end of the year. So income and expense accounts, they do zero out. Restricted funds do not. So now that we have just kind of a general idea of our different accounts, now we can actually start on creating them. So I'm sure you guys noticed that when looking at reports, there is a chart of accounts area that's for the report only. If you actually needed to create accounts, or if you needed to edit the chart of accounts, you're wanting to go over to the setting icon and choose chart of accounts from there. So here, this is generally about what your chart of accounts is going to look like. And it's just kind of just a sort of a general setup. Let's see. So you can notice that they are kind of staggered here, and you'll notice that there are some areas where you see these little lines, these little dotted lines. Whenever I see them, I think of egg cartons, so that's kind of just what I call them. But if you see these little egg cartons, these essentially mean they are categories, not actual accounts. So this is just a different way for you to organize your different accounts, just to make things easier for reporting. you can always go down here, and instead of adding a new account, which we'll do in just a couple seconds, you can always add a new category and say maybe I just wanted just something to do with just loose cash. So I could choose that and submit it. With categories, all you're going to input is just the name, and then you'll have that new category, and you can click on the little egg carton area, and you can move it however it is that you need. So you can, if it's all the way over to the left, then you can make it its own category, or you could also pull it over kind of over to the right, and you can see that you can make it a subcategory as well. So maybe if it was just kind of cash for maybe your checking account, then you can definitely do that. Then once you have that category, then you're ready to actually create an account to be underneath that category. So if I clicked new, I could just enter petty cash. And since we're in the asset area, we can choose whether or not we can write checks from this amount. So if you can write checks, then you would check this. You're not required to add in an account number, and you can just have the account just as it is right here. Underneath, you can see that you do have the option to add in an initial balance. It's not required, but if you already had some already in this account with your bank, then you definitely can add that initial balance. Basically, the beginning balances are going to be what it is in relation to how it is in the bank. So you're not going to want to come back here and change the beginning balances all too often, especially once you start actually making transactions in regards to this account. That can definitely muddle things up. So you're going to want to make sure that the initial balance is it does correspond with your bank account, and you'll go ahead and just submit that as you need. Then you can always just choose the little egg cartons and just go ahead and put it directly under cash. And you'll see that little indent, so it will show you that it is part of that category, and the category will always show the total of all of the accounts underneath it. So once you create an asset account, since a restricted fund is a piece of an asset account, you can also add in a new restricted fund if you needed to. So say if I wanted to go over to this U.S. bank checking, say I needed a new building fund, then you could go over to the asset that is going to be dealing with paying that building fund and clicking New Restricted Fund here. Then you'll be able to just add in a name. And if you need to add in an account number, you can. Otherwise, you can just go ahead and submit it. So you can see here that it starts out with 0. This is because you don't want to add any sort of money into the asset account. It's going to have to be taken from the unrestricted account in a journal entry and moved over into its restricted account. And we'll be going over journal entries and transfers tomorrow as well. So that's just kind of a light introduction on how to create your chart of accounts. You can create your account, you can open up your liabilities, income, and expenses, do the same thing, and just build from there. Other chart of accounts are very specific, so if you have any specific questions for your chart of account, please feel free to let me know, and we'll just review how it is that you want them to be shown in the site, and we will work from there. Finally, we do have budgets. So up here to our settings area, since we are still in the Christ Community Church book, after setting up the chart of account slightly, we can go over to budgets. Oh, and once you create a new account, you're going to want to make sure, I'm so glad this thing reminded me, that you're going to want to save your changes. But as you saw, it does have just kind of a sanity feature where it will ask you whether or not you wanted to confirm that or not. Basically, all the practice that I did, it has meant nothing. It just feels like everything is going wrong now. But thankfully, right here, you can see the budget window, and it's already been entered in. If you can see these sort of shaded, these gray shaded areas, this means it's a category. So it will only show the total of everything that's underneath it. So it's not an actual account. If you wanted to create or put in a budget for an account, you would need to find one of the accounts that are in these sort of white lines, like this general fund. You will also have the option to just add in a total, or you can add in specific totals per month. All you have to do is go over to the area that you want to change, just click inside of it, and it will open up this account for whatever it is that you need. So I can go ahead and type in a new budget, and you can see that everything that contains this account, it's going to automatically update itself as well. When you put it in the total, it is going to put all of the months equally, but if you needed to edit for a specific month, then you can certainly do that as well. It will affect the total, so you will want to go in and apply that to certain other areas as well. All right then. You also have the option to apply last year's budget or last year's actual to your budget. So if I'm already finished with general fund, let's say, and I go down here to education, I could just click right here and apply the previous year budget or the actual. It doesn't look like I had a previous year budget, so it just kind of clears it out. Or I could just use the actual and it updates appropriately. If you wanted to use these options for the entire budget, you could go up here to this drop-down menu, and you can change them all to last year's budget or last year's actual. So you can see that definitely zeroes it out. If you say, oops, I didn't want to do that, I can go back to the actual. Much like the chart of accounts, you are going to have to save it beforehand. Otherwise, you can just go ahead and refresh and it will go back to the way it was. One other way you can update your budgets, if maybe you don't have access to the internet or if you wanted to edit the budgets offline, you do have the option to export to Excel. So if you click here and open it up, then you can see that it has exported not only the specific totals, but also the calculations as well. So you can also change things here. See that it updated here. Then you can copy and then just paste to make those changes as well. And then if everything here looks good, you can click Changes, or you can click the Reset button just to start from scratch. Finally, we have fiscal years. And here are going to be all the fiscal years for this specific book. So just basically from the beginning of all of its transactions, that's where it's going to start. So obviously the current fiscal year here is the calendar year. If I wanted to change the starting month for the next fiscal year, I can do that. It will then create kind of a partial year between December 2022, say if I wanted to go over to a non-calendar year and change the next fiscal year to start in June, then it will create a partial fiscal year from the end of December 2022 to the beginning of June 2023. And then from then on, it will have a yearly fiscal year, a full year fiscal year. So you can see that there are some here that are locked, and there is the 2022 that is obviously unlocked. So with our icons, whatever you see here is what clicking it is going to do. So even though it does have an unlock button, it is technically locked. So 2021 is a locked fiscal year. If I wanted to unlock it to make some changes to it, I could click here. And you can see that 2020 now has the unlock button if I so wanted to go back. And if everything was finished, I could click this red button to relock it. So the green button basically is to unlock the fiscal year, and the red button is to lock it. Some people have been confused thinking that having the lock area means that it is locked, but that is not the case. You want to go ahead and lock everything up until the current year once everything is finished. All right then. All right, so that's just kind of the general tour of Church360 Ledger. And so if it is all right with you guys, we're just going to do a small little quiz, and then we'll just see if any of the information actually, if I actually parlayed the information correctly, or if I need a lot more practice. But we'll just go ahead and do our quiz, and I am launching it right now. So you should be able to see a question asking what type of account is used to create a bank account, and whether or not it's going to be an asset, a restricted, or an income account. So this is actually going to be money with an actual balance of what you actually have. And it looks like all of you know basic accounting and know that it is an asset account. So it's just basically anything that you own either in your bank account or even non-monetary things like property or your building. Second question, if your church takes out a loan, so something that you owe and you're going to pay back, how would you put that? Would it be income, expense, or liability? And everybody agrees it is a liability account. So anything that you own that you plan to pay. Our third question is multiple choice, or you get to choose multiples, where you get to select two types of accounts that actually have budgets, whether it's asset, liability, income, or expense. And everybody is on top of the game as usual. And it is income and expense accounts, as they are not the ones that carry over. And so if you ever needed to see how closely their budgets are being adhered to, you can always look at the statement of income and expense. And kind of related to the income and expense question, will a restricted fund carry over its balance or not? And that is true. And I'm only going to force you to do one more, and it is a true and false. Where does that restricted fund store itself? Is it actually in an asset, or is it actually just a liability? Okay, looks like almost everyone's voted. Okay, everybody has. And that is true. So thank you for dealing with my technical difficulties and my questions. But now I want to know, do you have any questions? Looks like Shirley had a question and left, so I'll just contact her by email. But did anyone else have a specific question? If not, you can definitely just reach out to us either by our phone number or by our support email. All right. Oh, how do I enter my budget info? That is a good question. I will go back to budgets real quick. So in order to add the budgets, you can add it into the total or month by month. And really all you have to do is just click on your specific account. So you can't click on any of these gray areas, but you can click the account and just start just kind of typing it in. And if I'm not getting your question, just please feel free just to elaborate or just email me and I can talk to you there. Do you have account receivable and assets? We do not. So you could create an asset account for that use, but account receivable and account payable, it is not available in Church360 Ledger at this time, Deborah. However, I can definitely add in feedback for our developers to look at. I can't make any promises because I'm not the developer. I'm not in on these meetings, but I can definitely nag at them at the very least and see if that might be feasible in the future. Any other questions? No? All right. Then I will just be thankful for your patience. Sorry we went over a little bit because of my technical difficulties, but if you guys ever need to reach out to me, I'm always happy to help however I can, and I do genuinely enjoy talking to churches and helping the ministry, so please feel free to let me know, and we'll just talk then. Thank you so much, guys, and have a lovely day.